Friday, October 16th, 2020. Demon Slayer the movie Infinity Train releases in 403 screens across Japan. Monday, October 19th, 2020. 3 days and $44 million later. And Infinity Train has officially become the highest grossing film globally for any feature on release that weekend, as well as achieving the highest grossing opening ever for a film in Japan. Infinity Train has been an overwhelming success. It's been less than 5 years since Koyohara Gotoke's manga Kimestu No Yaiba first appeared in Weekly Shonen Jump, and since then its success has literally been unparalleled. With the manga selling over 100 million copies, a record-breaking feature-length film, and a wildly successful and critically adored anime adaptation from Ufotable in 2019, the IP's growth potential going forward into 2021 and beyond is staggering. In recent weeks, with the franchise returning once more to the center of the anime universe, I decided to rewatch the series. During my first time through, I must admit that while I thoroughly enjoyed the spectacle that was Kimetsu no Yaiba, I never really dwelled on it beyond my initial sense of enjoyment upon watching it week to week. The rewatch, however, left a great impression on me, and I was quite captivated by several elements of the series itself. So to celebrate my growing admiration for the series and Infinity Train's unprecedented success, in this video I'd like to focus on one of the elements of Demon Slayer that I think was exceptionally well crafted. It is the protagonist lying at the heart of Kimetsu no Yaiba, Kamado Tanjiro. I would like to examine what has made the young Demon Slayer at the center of one of anime's most successful series so engaging to myself and to so many. Quickly, a note before we continue though, this video will focus on the events covered in the anime only, so there will be no manga spoilers within, have no fear. However, there will obviously be spoilers for the anime, so yes, you have been warned. Remember, if you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like, sharing also helps greatly, and please consider hitting the subscribe button with the notification bell turned on, please, and thank you. Trust me, it will be greatly appreciated. Anyways, now that the formalities have been formalized, let's get going. In Frank Hauser and Russell Reich's book, Notes on Directing, the pair wrote the following. In all the best material, the outcome is inevitable and inherent in the opening moment, and in every moment in between, realized that the end is in the beginning. I'd like you to bear those words in mind now as we talk about Cruelty. Cruelty is the opening episode of Kimetsu no Yaiba, and this episode is quite a revealing introduction to the series for a number of reasons, which I will get into during this video. It also does a quite fantastic job unambiguously establishing the dynamics of the world that we are first encountering as viewers, while at the same time establishing series protagonist Tanjiro as an oppositional force to that world. Throughout Cruelty, there is a deliberate emphasis on establishing the two opposing absolutes which will center the story going forward. On the one side you have the demons, and on the other you have the Demon Slayer core. We are first introduced to these opposing factions in second-hand fashion through Tanjiro's conversation with the elderly Saburo, as he shelters in the old man's home for the night. Through this interaction, we learn that the demons are in fact man-eaters and have terrorized humanity for as long as can be remembered, preying upon people from under the cover of darkness. As the pair delve deeper into discussion, we learn that the old man's entire family has mysteriously died at some point in the past, presumably at the hands of demons. The old man continues on to say that the only thing preventing demons from terrorizing and potentially devouring all humans is the presence of the Demon Slayer core, our protectors. Later in the episode, as Tanjiro returns home at dawn, we discover that, like Saburo, over the course of the previous night, his family has been slaughtered by an unknown demon, with the only remaining family member who is still warm being his sister Nezuko, who herself, it is later revealed, has mysteriously been turned into a demon. What's interesting about this event is that the massacre takes place entirely off-screen. We never see any signs of the demons responsible for the carnage, and all that we are confronted with is the grisly remains of the previous night's encounter. We later learn that the attack was carried out by one of the most powerful and feared demons in existence, series antagonist Kibutsuji Muzan. But at this juncture during the formative beats of the series, it's critical to the setup to keep anything as humanizing as a name, or the presence of Muzan himself. emphatically, out of shot. At this point, the demons of Kimestu No Yaiba need to be, and have been, firmly established as a dangerous but crucially animalistic threat. There appears to be no method or intent behind the slaughter of Tanjiro's family. Outwardly, it looks to be an act of mindless and indiscriminate violence. I found this to be a piece of very clever and subtle writing, as through the act of withholding the events of the previous night's attack from the audience, the writing instills a sense of one-dimensionality within the audience's mind in relation to the demons themselves. In short, the message that we are being presented with and conditioned to believe at this point in the narrative is demons bad, demon slayers good. The two-tonal black-white duality of the first act of Cruelty creates a clear opening for the narrative beats which are to follow. In particular, the introduction of our second absolute, the Demon Slayer core. At around the 12-minute mark, we encounter Giyu Tomioka, Demon Slayer, with blue eyes as emotionless and as cold as the snow that blankets the landscape around him, and a katana sporting the inscription Netsuya, destroy all evil or destroy demons depending on your translation. We are now confronted with the fanatical reality of what it takes to be a demon slayer. Here to rescue Tanjiro from being devoured by the now demon Nezuko, Tomioka's arrival should be a cause for optimism, if it were not for the events which preceded his arrival at the forest clearing. That brief moment of human emotion in the final seconds prior to Tomioka's first appearance have radically altered everything that the audience have been conditioned to believe about demons up to this point in the episode. As Tanjiro desperately pleads to his sister, Gambare, Gambare, hang in there, his words strike a chord, as somewhere deep within the now demon Nezuko's consciousness, there was recognition, a memory, a thread-like connection to their previous life as a human, and she began to cry. The implication of this moment is not insignificant. It negates the validity of everything that we, the audience, have been conditioned to believe about demons up to this point in the episode. The quandary now is this: if a demon retains some semblance of their apparently lost humanity within their present consciousness, even if it's buried deeply, say at an unconscious level, then aren't they in some respect at least partially still human? If that shred of humanity remains intact, then logically you have to view becoming a demon as not losing one's humanity in its entirety, but as something similar to a demonic possession. It's like an invasive pathogen, a virus taking control of the body and changing it. But it doesn't entirely expel the humanity, or at least not initially. If someone is suffering from a virus, we try and find a way to treat it. If someone is carrying a parasite within their body, we seek a method in which to expel it. And that's exactly what Tanjiro intends to do for his sister. Some core, perhaps irrational element of his character knows Nezuko can be cured. And at the outset of the episode, when he uttered the promise, "I'm going to save you no matter what," the subsequent reveal of Nezuko being a demon never changed that promise. Tanjiro believes Nezuko is still at least partially Nezuko and can be cured. That is an element of his character's truth. Those tears are justification for belief in that truth, and are proof that it may be possible to return Nezuko to her previous state. And as remote as that possibility may in fact be, Tanjiro intends to make it happen. That single moment drastically alters how the audience now perceive Tomioka's arrival. Prior to Nezuko regaining control of herself and crying, the injection of a demon slayer into the affairs of the siblings seemed like a potential avenue for some hope. Perhaps a demon slayer had encountered a situation like this before. Perhaps they would have some insight into how Tanjiro could fulfill the promise he had made to his sister. Now, however, there's a real sense of trepidation, a fear that that very potential for hope would kill first and ask questions later. The warning signs for Tanjiro are numerous. The manner in which Giyu addresses Nezuko is telling. "You call that thing your sister?" Despite Tanjiro's pleas that Nezuko has not and would never hurt anyone, demon or not, there is an unwillingness on Tomioka's part to grasp the nuance of the situation at play. And this is not a character flaw on Giyu's part. Of all the slayers we see throughout this series, his character is one of the most accepting of the possibility of phenomena existing outside of his understanding. When he calmly tells Tanjiro, "My job is to slay demons," needless to say, "I'm going to decapitate your sister," this is not a moment of villainy or needless cruelty. Decapitating demons is his job, and he states this matter-of-factly because that's all his job is and has ever been. There is no room for nuance or exceptionalism in the life of a demon slayer. You see the demon, you fight, and you kill the demon. That is your mission. That is what you were forged through brutal hardship to do. From the charge etched in his blade, destroy demons, to the kanji metsu, exterminate, adorning the back of his uniform. It's incomprehensible to Giyu for there to be any other way in which to deal with demons, as he hasn't been conditioned to believe in the possibility of an alternative. So when a starving Nezuko protects the body of the fallen Tanjiro, the look on Giyu's face speaks volumes. He can't believe what he's just witnessed. It's analogous to a pig flying. That's not what they're supposed to do. he instantly recalls Tanjiro's pleas and decides that perhaps the sibling pair might be quote-unquote different from others. And inspired by the belief that the two may in fact really be different, he allows Nezuko to live. He has been moved, he has been centered by the strength of both Tanjiro's convictions and Nezuko's restraint. This is the first victory for Tanjiro in the series, but the encounter serves as a warning for similar, more brutal challenges in the future that Tanjiro will face as he goes deeper into the world of the Demon Slayer. It also serves as a harbinger, heralding one of the most powerful opponents Tanjiro will face in the series, overcoming the deep-rooted, prejudicial attitudes of the Demon Slayer core. So at this juncture, I'd like to go into things deeper by examining Tanjiro on a meta level. I've been alluding to it up to this point in the video, but now I'd like to come out and formally establish the position on Tanjiro that I've been working towards in this essay. I read Tanjiro as a static character, and by that I mean he lacks character development, or a formal character arc in any real sense. Tanjiro is essentially a flat character. Now, while this sounds like a pejorative or negative take on how his character is written, the title of this video would obviously suggest otherwise. While character development or dynamic characters are traditionally seen as signposts of a well-written character in fiction, in this instance I believe establishing a flat protagonist arc was the right play for this particular type of story. And before I go into deeper detail on how this type of character arc impacts upon the story itself, I'd first like to quickly touch on the other side of the coin, dynamic character arcs, so that we have a deeper frame of reference to refer back to when discussing the contrasting flat arc of Tanjiro. Dynamic character arcs can be broken into two different forms. There is the most common arc, the positive change arc, and the rarer but equally dynamic negative change arc. Be it either positive or negative, dynamic arcs all start with a lie. It is the lie that the character believes about themselves, or about the world in which they reside in at the outset of the story. Over the course of that story, that lie will eventually be stripped away from them through the events of the narrative. So to serve as an example, let me now introduce the 2014 series from Kinema Citrus, Barakamon. The series follows the recently disgraced calligrapher Seishu Handa and his time spent living in the remote Goto Islands. A decorated artist even at a relatively young age, Handa gets exiled to the islands by his father after assaulting a well-respected arts director in a fit of rage. After the director had claimed that Handa's latest award-winning effort was mired in mediocrity and just plain dull. In Barakamon, the lie that Handa believes is that if he wishes to return to his previous highs as an artist, and maybe even surpass them one day, he must reconnect with himself and look for answers and inspiration inwardly. Handa firmly believes in the adage that the mind will be sharper and keener in seclusion, and he views his exile to the islands as an opportunity for himself to embrace solitude. It is his very belief in this lie which results in Handa constantly pushing away the well-intentioned residents of the island, who throughout the opening episodes begin to insert themselves into his day-to-day life. Over the course of the series' 12 episodes, Barakamon's story acts as a crucible in which to change Handa's belief in his lie, and his positive arc is embracing a new truth by the series' conclusion. In Handa's case, that new truth was to begin looking for inspiration outwardly. By doing so, he learned the value of actually living life and began creating outward-facing art, which was reflective of his own experience and the experiences of the ones he grew to care about over the course of the series. By the way, if you're interested in a deeper analysis on the subject of Handa's character journey, I'd like to point you in the direction of the video I previously did on Barakamon, the link to which is in the description below. Anyways, asides now aside, back to Tanjiro. Ultimately, the difference between a dynamic character like Handa and a flat one such as Tanjiro is that Tanjiro, rather than beginning Kimestu No Yaiba holding on to a lie, begins it believing in a truth. And as for that truth, as stated earlier in this video, Tanjiro's belief is that Nezuko is still at least partially Nezuko and can be made human once more. And it's through a combination of his lived experience with his sister and his own innate goodness as a character, which gives him the clarity of vision to understand the second element of his character's truth. That is his belief that demons are not the, quote, hideous monsters Giyu brands them as in episode 21, but rather tragic figures deserving of compassion even when they are our enemies. In episode 8, the Lady Tamiyo astutely perceives that truth within him from just a single utterance. Her opening remark to Tanjiro is the following: "You still use the term person to refer to even a transformed demon." With a dynamic character arc such as Handa's, the character development is in essence an internal transformation, which they undergo as they struggle to overcome some major flaw or wound within themselves. Tanjiro's flat character arc, on the other hand, shifts the focus of the narrative away from his own change to changing what is around him, as now the flaw resides externally. It is within the setting of the story itself. It's the world itself. The lie the character believes instead becomes the lie the world believes. And in order to exact the desired change required of him as the protagonist, Tanjiro needs to stick resolutely to his convictions. He will of course be tried and tested, but he must hold on tightly to his character's truth in the face of the opposition that the world will inevitably throw his way, as it kicks back at him, desperately struggling to maintain its own status quo. By the end of Cruelty, Tanjiro has been placed center stage between the now established opposing poles of Demon and Demon Slayer, and as the series progresses forward from this point, he has been tasked with bending both sides to his will. He must center both to his worldview, just as Giyu and Nezuko were centered in the series' opening episodes. Returning to Hauser and Reich's words once more, Cruelty truly was an ending fitting for the start. So with his task now laid bare before him, let's explore the world itself, and how exactly Tanjiro will begin centering these two opposing absolutes. In the opening beats of Cruelty, the Demon Slayer Corps, as a collective, is positioned as the paragon of human resistance. A collective of brave souls heroically staring down the barrel of a menacing and potentially all-consuming demonic threat. But as the narrative advances, there is an inversion, as we go on to see the Slayers as a collective undergo their own development, and it's mostly negative. From their initial codification as a force of absolute good in this world at the outset of the series, what we go on to see as the story progresses is a descent back to the middle. Our expectations for what is the force for good in this series is over time subverted and eroded away as we witness multiple examples of the Corps' own shortcomings, its own fallibility. From the shocking aggression of Genya in episode 5 to Zenitsu's cowardice, Inosuke's pride, Shinobu's cruelty, to the naked and cynical greed of the unnamed Demon Slayer that the lower fifth Rui kills in episode 18, this descent will go on to reach its eventual nadir in episode 22, Master of the Mansion, and 23, Hashira meeting. Here is where we are introduced to the 9 pillars which serve as the bedrock of the Demon Slayer Corps, its greatest champions and the full and shocking flesh and blood personification of what is ailing within the Demon Slayer Corps systemically. As the truth of Tanjiro's indiscretion is revealed to the group, the resulting interactions are telling, from the naked aggression of both the Wind Pillar, Shinizugawa Sanemi, and Igero Obani, the Serpent Pillar, to the disturbingly matter-of-fact attitudes of the remaining pillars, with Tomioka being the sole exception, as they calmly and in some instances outright eagerly discuss foregoing a trial and killing both Nezuko and Tanjiro right there and then. While disaster is eventually averted, thanks in part to the backing of Kaguya Ubuyashiki, the leader of the Slayer Corps, this encounter with the Hashira epitomizes the mammoth task which Tanjiro is facing as he somehow goes about countering the Hashira's intransigence. After Tanjiro's audience with Kaguya and the Hashira has reached conclusion, and as he is being literally dragged out by a pair of Kakushi, the Demon Slayer Corps cleanup crew, there is a line of dialogue uttered by the female Kakushi in the midst of what is a pretty comic scene, which I found to be a very revealing insight into who the Hashira are as a collective, and how they are viewed by others who are more familiar with them than we are by this point in the series. As she chastises Tanjiro for his behaviour during the Hashira meeting, she says the following: "You have no idea how terrifying the Hashira are." Terrifying, indeed. In his 1886 book Beyond Good and Evil, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote the following aphorism: "Beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster." Tanjiro's greater role within the Slayer Corps as an agent of change is to elicit a metamorphosis in both perspective and attitude within the Demon Slayers as a collective. Slaying demons is part of the job, and it always will be. That will never change as long as demons continue to prey upon humans, and until Muzan is defeated at the very least. But it's not that you slay demons, it's how you slay them which is important in this instance. During a Giyu inner monologue in Cruelty, we get an insight into what is driving the Water Pillar. He urges Tanjiro to, quote, "Feel the rage, the powerful, pure rage of not being able to forgive will become your answering drive to take action." Then later in the series, during episode 24, Rehabilitation Training, the insect Hashira Shinobu Kocho reveals to Tanjiro that, like Giyu, despite her knowing and even wishing it were otherwise, She too is driven by a hatred that she cannot let go of. To refer back to that Nietzsche quote once more, rage and hatred are the tools of monsters. And by using those tools ourselves to drive us and to guide our actions as we fight those supposed monsters, we begin to walk a tightrope, one that it is all too easy to fall from and be lost to. I'd like to reiterate the words of Urokodaki Sensei, Tanjiro's master, once more now. This kid isn't going to cut it. He's too kind and can't make decisions. He's facing a demon, yet the scent of kindness remains. He has empathy for even a demon. Giyu, he's never going to make it. That innate kindness of Tanjiro's, which the opening episode goes to great lengths to expose us to. The scenes of him caring for his mother and siblings, the warmth and affection he shares with the people of the village, his absolute readiness to help them in any way that he can, to later on in episode 2 and his insistence on paying the farmer for the damaged basket, which he is gifted. All of these seemingly inconsequential, quieter moments in their own way feed into the larger narrative, as it establishes his humanity in the opening beats of the series. And it is that very humanity, that kindness, his empathic nature, which should be his greatest weakness as he begins his journey to becoming a demon slayer. As by doing so, Tanjiro will be entering into a system which is anathema to who he is as a person. It is a system which rewards those who successfully repress their own humanity and who feed on and thrive off of rage and hatred. Just look at its greatest champions. The cruel irony of the Demon Slayer Corps, as they are presently constructed, is beginning to come into focus. To fight monsters, they must become monstrous themselves. And so as saccharine as it sounds, Tanjiro needs to be the one to show his fellow Demon Slayers that a Demon Slayer motivated by emotions such as compassion and empathy is no lesser for it, but potentially something far greater. So by the season's finale, while he still has a long way to go to transforming the Demon Slayer core, root and branch, there nevertheless is a shadow of what is yet to come, as his influence is beginning to take effect at an interpersonal level.
Tanjiro.
As has already been established in this video, a flat character arc such as Tanjiro's ultimately shifts the focus of the story away from his own development to that of the supporting cast. And by both the force of his presence and by the example that he sets, he will inspire change in the other characters which he encounters along his journey. They are the dynamic characters of the series. And so while Tanjiro himself should remain an ever constant throughout, the audience still receives a sense of gratification from witnessing the positive changes that his presence creates within his fellow Demon Slayers. As the series is still very much an ongoing affair by the time we get to the 26th and final episode of the anime, New Mission, those changes are really only in the early stages of taking hold in some of the other characters. Right now they are more so a collection of isolated instances than profound, everlasting change. However, they nevertheless still serve as evidence of something greater that is beginning to take shape in those around him. Most notably, we can see the transformative effects that his presence is having on his most immediate contemporaries, the other Mizunoto, Zenitsu, Inosuke, and Kanao. All three have to some degree been positively affected through their interactions with Tanjiro. For example, take Zenitsu. He sees and admires the immense degree of kindness and patience that Tanjiro puts out into the world. And despite the comically low level of confidence which he exudes, and the almost insufferably negative self-perception he holds of himself, this self-professed coward was inspired by Tanjiro's example to act against type, and bravely defend this mysterious box, which means so much to Tanjiro, by shielding it from harm at the expense of his own personal well-being. Then later on in the series, in episode 17, you must master a single thing. After a stunning battle with the Spider Demon's son, in what Zenitsu believes are his final moments of life, we get a brief glimpse of his future growth. Inspired by the memories of his master and his friendship with Tanjiro, inspired by the pair's unwillingness to give up on him despite all reason to do so, inspired, he finds resolve in their example by refusing to give up on himself. He won't just succumb to the poison's effects and, quote, take the easy way out. Instead, he begins to slow his breathing and as a result slow down the poison's effects on his body as he bravely clings to life. And he does this despite the understanding that doing so will result in prolonging the unimaginable pain that he is currently enduring, as his body literally breaks down at the hands of the Spider Demon's venom, which is coursing through his veins. This beautiful scene of Zenitsu laying there and finding a calm acceptance as he stares down the reality of his own impending death couldn't help but put me in mind of one of my favourite quotes from the novel Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and how succinctly I felt that these words captured the beauty of the final moments of this episode. Quote, This cold-blooded walk to his own destruction would require a different kind of bravery. It's dynamic moments of growth like Zenitsu's here which make investing our emotion in the supporting cast so gratifying in Kimestu No Yaiba. And it is Tanjiro's written treatment as a flat character which enables episodes like You Must Master a Single Thing to be so profoundly felt and enjoyed by the audience. Later on, as the series continues forwards into future arcs, and as the narrative races closer towards conclusion, those changes that Tanjiro effects onto the other members of the Demon Slayer Corps will be more lasting and even more profound for being so. But for now, we must acknowledge and celebrate even those most minor of victories. The written treatment of the demons in Kimetsu no Yaiba structurally is the same treatment the Slayer Court receives, only it plays out inversely. Over the course of the series' 26 episodes, the Slayer Corps are gradually centered by following a negative change arc. While on the whole they still remain the de facto agency for good in the world itself, the series builds up a dramatic tension between both Tanjiro and the Slayer Corps by showcasing the many negative aspects the Slayers display at an individual level. This gives the Corps a greater degree of depth by humanizing it through the collective flaws and fallibility of its membership. And it also creates an oppositional force for Tanjiro to contend with, as both his resolve and conviction are challenged throughout the series. These conflicts with the other Corps members tend to exist at an emotional or psychological level, appearing predominantly in the form of ideological clashes between both Tanjiro and his peers. Physical conflict is rare and generally one-sided, for he cannot and will not engage them in battle, as doing so would be in violation of the core rules. But in those rare instances when Tanjiro is provoked into taking action physically, he uses his head. Literally. As we see him headbutting both Inosuke and the Wind Pillar Sanemi during what are his most trying interactions with other core members. It might be a little bit too on the nose for some, but personally I find it delightful that one of Tanjiro's most useful and distinct physical attributes as a character is a literal hard head. As figuratively, it is something he desperately needs to hold on to if he is to successfully bend the world to his truth. Essentially, the Slayer Corps serve as the mental hurdle Tanjiro must overcome in the series, and we saw this dynamic already play itself out in a microcosm during Cruelty, episode 1 of the series. This interplay is likewise the case for the demons. Their written treatment throughout the course of the series has also been established during Cruelty, when we saw Nezuko's transition from what was essentially a wild and terrifying creature to something far more complex in its humanity, as she recognized the fraternal bonds that she shares with her brother and eventually overcame the demonic drive that was compelling her to feed. Her ultimate victory by the conclusion of the episode was regaining control over her senses during that key moment, marked with a falling tear, as she was once again able to exercise her own free will. Nezuko's arc within the episode forces the audience to acknowledge that demons are something far more complex than just a series of animal drives and impulses, or at the very least, that they have the potential to be more. So when we are later introduced to other demons in future arcs, Tanjiro's experience with his sister serves as a contextual bedrock for what is about to transpire. These demons, like Nezuko in episode 1, will undergo their own collective centering in the audience's mind through their interactions with Tanjiro. Unlike their adversaries, the Slayer Corps, the demons, by contrast, undergo a sort of positive arc, as through the use of flashbacks and the emotional narrative which plays out as they are battling Tanjiro, we are able to recognize the interiority or depth within the demons as beings. This level of depth is one of the series' most compelling aspects, as it creates a moral ambiguity and takes the narrative beyond a simple battle of angels and demons, by creating a portrait of demonhood which is at once more rounded and also contradictory to the image of the quote hideous monsters that both the Slayer Corps and the wider society at large paint them out as being in the formative beats of the series. At this point I'm going to step outside the realms of Kimetsu no Yaiba once again, but bear with me as this is leading somewhere. I want to talk about the TCG Magic the Gathering, and specifically the plane of Theros. Theros is a world within the wider MTG universe which was created by drawing inspiration from ancient Greece. On that plane there is a mechanically unique tribe of zombies known as the Returned. According to the lore of Theros, a Returned is a creature who has escaped the underworld and returned once more to the world of the living. Returning comes at a cost though, and on Theros, in order for an individual to leave the underworld, one must give up their identity and their face. What results from severing identity from one's body is that the individual suffers a complete loss of memory pertaining to their own previous existence. Although their names and their pasts are forgotten, they still retain skills and personality traits, such as, for example, being musically gifted. But the true tragedy of the returned is that despite having no memory of their previous identity, they nevertheless suffer its absence, as within them exists a perpetual sense of loss. They are not acutely aware of what it is exactly that they have lost, they just know that they have lost a key part of themselves, and that this feeling of lacking something will live within them forever. The returned are not a mindless horde either. They form communities, experience fleeting emotions, and follow daily routine. But their existence is ultimately nothing more than shadow play, as without identity of self or an ability to nurture true, long-term memories, these elements of their lives have no weight, substance. However, this tragic existence runs even deeper. The returned aren't just thinking, speaking undead. They are also feeling ones. Although their lack of identity prevents long-term memory formation, they can still feel emotion based off of their present day-to-day experiences. And these emotions, coupled with the empty lives that they are now leading, mean that those feelings tend towards that of darkness, frustration, bitterness, loneliness, resentment, anger, and melancholy. It sounds just like a demon. What I'm attempting to do here is to draw a parallel between the demons of Kimestu No Yaiba and the returned of Theros. There are obviously many overlaps mechanically between the pair, with the most significant being an absence of personal identity. The demons, like the returned, live with an absence that they seemingly cannot rid themselves of. It is what drives them as agents in the series, and it's ironically also the defining factor in establishing each demon's individuality arc to arc. In essence, what makes them functionally unique is a manifestation of some lost element of their previous identity as humans. Take, for example, the morphed hand demon that Tanjiro encounters during final selection. Through a flashback occurring in the moments right after he is defeated by Tanjiro, we witness a scene of him as a human child, alone, crying and scared, surrounded by darkness. He desperately reaches out a hand and calls out into the night for his brother to come to his side, and to hold his hand like he always did when he was scared. This scene is important as it not only provides an emotional depth to the demon as a character, but it also provides context for his present physical appearance. That hand of his brother's, which he clung to as a child for comfort and safety, now has taken on a literal demonic form, as a multitude of hands now wrap themselves around his head and torso to keep his neck safe. Later on in the episode, after it is revealed that this demon had in fact killed his elder sibling, those calls for his brother to help him cease. As catching himself and confused, the demon asks, "Wait, who is this brother person?" From here we get a scene that truly defines Tanjiro's character. The morphed demon, in a moment which mirrors that scene of him as a child, now at the point of death and too scared to even close his eyes, reaches out a hand once more, just as he did as a child. And Tanjiro, moved by the profound sadness radiating from this dying creature, gifts him a final kindness by taking that hand in his own and reciting a blessing. This moment of empathy triggers something latent within the demon, as tears form in his eyes and memories of his life as a human return to him once more, and now finally, knowing who he is and knowing who he once was, he can die peacefully. This interplay between the morphed hand demon and Tanjiro is only the first instance of a back and forth which will play itself out time and again going forward as Tanjiro encounters future demons. However, despite the changing circumstances or variables encounter to encounter, Tanjiro is nothing less than absolutely constant in his behavior. He affords each of the demons at least a moment's consideration, and it is this simple gift of empathy which allows each of them to achieve reconciliation. A final reunification between their past lives as humans and their present reality as demons, before finally departing for the afterlife. The demon's absence of a memory pertaining to their own human experience is at once a very powerful obstacle for Tanjiro to overcome, and at the same time the key argument in support of his belief that they are in fact the tragic creatures he brands them as in episode 21. On the one hand, during combat they are infinitely more challenging as opponents, as they have literally no conscious memory of the humanity that Tanjiro is attempting to appeal to. So as a consequence, it's far easier to just treat them as monsters and exterminate them on sight, like the Hashira do. rather than attempt to reason with or appeal to some latent sense of humanity which may or may not lie within them. So in episode 18, when Tanjiro confronts Rui about the false bonds of fear he uses to control the Spider Demon family, Rui doesn't merely reject Tanjiro outright because he is some sort of sadistic monster. It runs deeper than that. He literally cannot understand Tanjiro's reasoning, as the bonds of love he once shared with his parents as a human child is something that is completely and utterly denied to him. This is the tragic reality of a demon. The only relationship he has any context for or experience of now is that bond of terror that Muzan holds over demons like himself. So it's no surprise that the bonds that he himself has created and that the Spider Demon family all share mirror the bonds that Muzan has fostered amongst demonhood. Ultimately, Rui is just like the returned of Theros, as at all times he's acutely aware that by creating this false family, he is attempting to fill some unknowable void within himself, a void he cannot even articulate. In episode 20, Pretend Family, after he is defeated by Tomioka, we get the following conversation between Rui and the Spider Demon mother. When the mother asks him, "What do you want us to do, Rui? What do you mean by family?" he responds with the following. "I don't know, because I have no memories of when I was a human. I thought that if I could feel a family bond, my memories would come back, the bond of a real family." If the Demon Slayer core are the mental or emotional hurdle that Tanjiro must overcome in this series, the demons by contrast are the physical one. When confronted with the challenges that the demons provide, Tanjiro never wavers in his resolve, as at all times he is absolutely and unwaveringly consistent in his actions, as he is supposed to be as a flat character. In essence, the obstacle of facing the demons ultimately boils down to matters of strength. And as each contest ensues, the dramatic tension is invariably this. Is Tanjiro, at present, physically capable enough to slay the demon he is currently facing in battle? The question of fighting demons as an emotional hurdle would never really come into play. Again and again since his initial encounter with the first demon he faced in combat at the temple during episode 2, Tanjiro has been unwaveringly humane in how he battles them. No matter the horrors or brutality which he is confronted with, or how monstrous his opponents have behaved during their interactions with him, he almost instinctually treats them humanely. Perhaps the most fitting example of the true strength of his character was in episode 16, letting someone else go first, when he defeated the Spider Demon mother. As the battle rushes towards its inevitable conclusion, and as Tanjiro hurtles downwards from the night sky, blade raised, preparing to use his final attack against his opponents, there is a twist, as things do not go as expected for him. Just as he is preparing to end the contest using the attack, first water form, water surface slash, an attack which is both efficient and powerful, he is confronted with an unexpected sight. As he races towards her, sword at the ready, the Spider Demon mother closes her eyes and serenely appears to accept her fate. As she slowly reaches out her hand in calm acceptance of the inevitable death which is hurtling down from the heavens towards her, instantly reacting to this display, Tanjiro has the presence of mind to change his attack from the first to the 5th water form, Blessed Rain after the drought, a sword strike of kindness, which kills a target with little to no pain. In isolation, what is remarkable about this moment is that Tanjiro gets the kill without holding on to any degree of malice. Prior to finishing the battle, he bore witness to unimaginable horrors, as both himself and Inosuke were forced to defend themselves against a multitude of attacks from their comrades, the other Demon Slayer core members. These other Slayers, suffering and in unspeakable pain with bones snapped and organs punctured, were forced to become marionettes, living puppets for the Spider Demon mother, as she attempted to kill both Tanjiro and Inosuke. As the battle drags on, and as it appears that the pair have successfully conceived of a way to save their fellow core members, there is a cruel and gut-wrenching twist. In an act of terror-filled frustration at not being able to kill the pair of young Mizunoto quickly enough to satisfy Rui, the mother cuts the strings and discards her fragile human puppets. Surely a moment in and of itself which would justify an act of anger or hate-filled retribution. But as we saw, it never comes. In passing, she would know only tranquility. In her own words, the Spider Demon mother was released from an existence which was only suffering and fear. Earlier in this video, when discussing the Slayer core, I said that it's not that you slay demons, it's how you slay them which is important. Tanjiro's actions reinforce the statement time and again during his encounters with the Spider Demon mother, with Rui, with Koyogai the drum demon, and with the morphed hand demon. He shows us that his way of slaying demons is both effective and in and of itself an act of defiance against Muzan. Muzan is a creature who inspires nothing but terror in the demons who are under him. Just look at the final moments of the Swamp Demon's life in episode 7, or the massacre of the lower 6 in episode 26. Tanjiro's actions in the series by contrast are a literal direct challenge to Muzan's supremacy, as by treating the demons that he encounters throughout the series with empathy, he is able to break the hold that Muzan holds over them, even if it's just for the final moments of their lives. That act of severing the ties between demon and master in and of itself is an act of rebellion against the progenitor demon, as ultimately everything between the pair comes down to a matter of humanity. On the one hand, you have the villain, a demon who does everything he can to appear to be human, a demon who goes into a rage and slaughters a group of innocents because it was remarked that he looked sickly, a demon who desperately tries to mimic his own twisted sense of what it thinks humanity actually is, without ever truly comprehending what it actually means to be human. And on the other, you have a protagonist who exudes nothing but humanity. And that's where we will leave it for this video. Sorry it's been so long between projects. I found myself in a funk and used this video to literally write out the rust. I hope it turned out well and that you enjoyed it. I will be doing my best to upload much more often going forward. If you want to hear more from me, go check out the podcast. The link is in the description below. And remember, if you like this video and want to show some support, please consider leaving a like, hitting that notification bell and subscribing. Thank you for sticking with me until the end. Until next time, fair viewers, bye bye, love you, bye.